to Nemesis.
Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to Nemesis. Thank you so much for being here with me today. This is a very tragic case and one I want to tell as best I can. We live in a remarkable age. You can order a heritage kit to your door, swab the inside of your cheek, post it back, and within weeks you have a map of yourself, where your people came from, who your distant cousins are, which corners of the world carry your blood. Millions of people have done exactly that. Millions of results sitting in databases, quietly connecting families across continents, across oceans, across centuries. And yet, there is a woman we have never been able to name, not for want of trying, not for lack of technology. In an age where a heritage kit has reunited families who didn't know the other existed, she remains unknown. Unnamed, unclaimed. Not a single thread leads back to her. But I want you to remember something before we go any further. She was loved once. She was somebody's baby. Someone counted her fingers and toes and thought she was the most perfect thing they had ever seen. Someone watched her take her first steps. Someone knew her laugh. And then the world lost her and never came back for her. I want to tell you about her today, and because she never got to keep her name, we're going to give her one. We're going to call her Bridget, patron saint of travellers, because wherever she came from, however she ended up where she did, this woman travelled, and she travelled alone. This is her story. Norway in November is a particular kind of cold. Not the cold you brush off with a thick coat and a brisk walk. This is the kind that settles into the bones of the landscape itself, the kind that turns the world grey and still and ancient. Isdalen, the ice valley. Even the name carries a warning. It sits outside Bergen, a city on Norway's western coast, surrounded by 7 mountains, beautiful in the way that wild, untamed places are beautiful, remote, quiet. The kind of place where sound gets swallowed whole. On the 1st of November 1970, a father and his 2 daughters were walking through Isdalen, an ordinary family walk in an extraordinary landscape. And then they found her. She was lying amongst the rocks, her body badly burned. Around her, arranged with a deliberateness that would trouble investigators for decades, were empty bottles of liquor, a broken umbrella, and a passport, half burned, as though someone had tried to destroy it, but hadn't quite finished the job. And then there was the jewellery, a watch, other pieces, not scattered, not dropped in panic or haste, placed, carefully, intentionally, as though whoever left them there wanted them to be found exactly as they were, as though they meant something to someone, or were meant to say something to someone. To this day, nobody knows what. The police who arrived that day in Isdalen had no way of knowing they were standing at the beginning of one of the most baffling mysteries Norway had ever seen. They had a body, badly burned. A woman, they believed, somewhere between 25 and 30 years old, dark-haired, well-built, around 5'4". But identifying her was going to be almost impossible, because someone had thought of everything. Every single label had been removed from her clothing. Every single one. Not torn in haste. Removed. Carefully and completely. Her shoes. Her coat. Every garment she wore that day had been stripped of anything that might tell you where it came from, what shop, what country, what name. And her hands, her fingerprints had been sanded away, not damaged by the fire, deliberately removed before she ever got to that mountain. She had taken sandpaper to her own fingertips until there was nothing left to read. Think about what that tells you about the life she was living. This was a woman who could never afford to be found out, not by anyone, not for any reason, and yet here she was, found. When the forensic examination began, what investigators discovered didn't simplify anything. It made everything infinitely more disturbing. Bridget had sleeping pills in her system, not a handful, not a careless overdose. Between 50 and 70 tablets of phenobarbital, a powerful sedative, the kind of quantity that leaves no room for accident, no room for misunderstanding. That alone should have killed her. But there was something else. Soot residue, deep in her lungs. And that detail changes everything. Because soot in the lungs means one thing, and one thing only. She was breathing when the fire started. She was alive when the flames reached her. 50 to 70 sleeping pills and she was still alive. Which means those pills were not enough on their own, or they weren't given enough time to finish what they started. And then there was the bruising around her neck. She didn't give herself that either. Someone was with Bridget on that mountain. Someone who had drugged her, or forced those drugs into her, held her by the throat, and then set her on fire while she was still breathing. The original coroner called it suicide. They changed that ruling, eventually, to undetermined cause of death, because even the police couldn't ignore what the evidence was telling them. Bridget didn't go to that mountain to die. She was taken there. Let's talk about Bridget. Not how she died, but who she was. Because behind every disguise, behind every false name, behind every carefully removed label, there was a woman. A real, breathing, thinking, feeling woman who had made choices that put her in the most dangerous position imaginable. She was estimated to be somewhere between 25 and 30 years old. Dark hair, brown eyes, well-dressed. Observers who encountered her across Europe in the weeks before her death described her as composed, quiet, watchful, always watchful. In the weeks leading up to November 1970, she had been seen in several European cities, moving constantly, never settling, checking in under different names, always paying cash, always alone. She carried wigs, non-prescription glasses purely as disguise, cosmetics not for vanity, but for transformation. She could become someone else entirely within minutes. And she travelled with 8 passports, 8 different women, 8 different lives she could step into if the one she was wearing became too dangerous. But here is the detail that stops me every single time. Her fingerprints. She had sanded them away herself, deliberately, painstakingly, until there was nothing left to read. Think about what it takes to do that. The patience, the pain, the absolute cold necessity of it. This was not vanity. This was a woman who not paranoia. This was a woman who understood that whatever she knew, whatever she was carrying inside her head, falling into the wrong hands was a fate worse than death itself. She made herself invisible because the alternative was unthinkable. And yet someone still found her. In those last hours, as she was led up into the cold, grey silence of Isdalen, I believe she knew. A woman that careful, that trained, that prepared for every possibility doesn't walk willingly into a remote valley in November without understanding what is waiting at the end of that walk. The bruising on her neck tells us she didn't simply accept it. I want you to picture her in those last moments, twisting, trying to pull away, her body already betraying her, the tablets doing their work, her legs weakening beneath her, her training telling her to fight even as everything else was shutting down. She couldn't get away, but she tried, right until she couldn't anymore. And that is the last true thing we know about Bridget. She never stopped trying to survive. But let's go back to that mountainside for a moment, because the mountain itself has something to tell us. It wasn't snowing that day, or if it had been, the ground was clear enough when the fire was lit, and that matters more than you might think. Snow dampens fire, suppresses it. If there had been significant snow on the ground around Bridget that day, she would not have burned the way she did. The fire burned hot. It burned well. Hot enough to make identification almost impossible. That doesn't happen by accident. Someone knew what they were doing. Someone may have come prepared. Because a fire that burns that completely in a remote valley in a Norwegian November doesn't just happen. It is made to happen. And then there is the question that has quietly haunted investigators for decades. The footprints. Isdalen in November. Cold ground. Rough terrain. The kind of surface that holds a mark. If someone walked Bridget up that mountain, and everything we know tells us someone did, then someone walked back down again afterwards. So where are those footprints? Nobody has ever given a satisfactory answer to that question. And some people who have studied this case for years, have stopped believing that is an accident. While investigators were still trying to make sense of what they'd found on that mountain, someone at Bergen railway station was opening 2 uncollected suitcases. They were hers. Yes, there were wigs. Yes, there were false passports and disguises. We know what kind of life she was living. But set all of that aside for a moment, because amongst everything else she carried, there were brooches, ornate, beautiful, completely impractical. In a life where everything served a purpose, where every item was chosen for survival or concealment, she kept beautiful things, things that meant something, things that were hers, and only hers, and that watch placed carefully beside her on the mountain. Someone put that there with intention. She was a person. Beneath every layer, she was a person. And I find myself thinking about the officers who opened those suitcases at Bergen railway station, going through her things, her brooches, her creams, her watch. She had spent her entire life making sure nobody could get close enough to know her, guarding every detail, every trace, every thread that might lead back to who she really was. And in the end, strangers went through everything she owned, laid it all out on a table and photographed it. I hope they were gentle with her things. I think she'd have hated it. Let's talk about what Bridget almost certainly was, because at some point you have to stop calling it a theory. 8 passports, multiple languages spoken fluently, a life lived entirely in transit across Europe, labels removed from every item of clothing, fingerprints sanded away deliberately, 2 suitcases packed like an operational kit, and a death on a remote mountainside that the authorities could never quite explain cleanly enough to close. This was the height of the Cold War. Europe in 1970 was a chessboard, East against West, trust nobody, every city a battleground of information and counter-information. Spies were not the stuff of James Bond films. They were ordinary-looking people sitting in ordinary cafes, in ordinary clothes, passing secrets that could change the course of history. They looked exactly like Bridget. Think about what she could do. She could transform her appearance within minutes. She spoke multiple languages fluently enough to pass as a native speaker. She could move across borders under different names without raising a single flag. She left no trace, no record, no footprint. That is not a skill set you stumble into. That is years of training, years of discipline, years of living inside a lie so completely that the lie becomes the only truth you know. And Interpol had no record of her. Not one country, not one agency, Not one government database anywhere in the world said, yes, we know this woman, which tells you one of two things. Either she was so good at what she did that she genuinely never appeared on any radar anywhere, or the people who trained her made absolutely certain she never would. Both of those possibilities should frighten you equally, because one means she was extraordinary, and the other means she was protected, right up until the moment she wasn't. Here is where we are today. Bridget's jaw is still held in a forensic archive in Norway, preserved, waited on, as though even her bones refuse to give up, and science is finally catching up with her story. Investigators at Kripos and the University of Bergen have run isotope analysis on her teeth, reading the chemical signature left behind as those teeth were forming in childhood, mapping the minerals, tracing the water, the food, the soil of wherever she grew up, and it has narrowed down, significantly, to a specific region she most probably came from. They are getting closer to her. Her DNA and handwriting have also been analysed, and they point somewhere too, a direction, a region, a people she belonged to without ever being able to say so out loud. And then there are those gold teeth, unusual, distinctive, the kind of dental work that was specific to certain countries, certain techniques, certain hands in a certain era. Modern forensic dentistry can look at craftsmanship the way an art expert looks at brushstrokes. It carries a signature, whether the maker intended it to or not. Somewhere there is a dentist's record, possibly buried in an archive, possibly forgotten in a filing cabinet in a city we haven't looked in yet, with her real name written on it in someone else's handwriting, and those footprints, or rather the absence of them. If someone walked Bridget up that mountain, and everything we know suggests someone did, then someone walked back down again. In 1970, forensic capabilities were a fraction of what they are today. Ground that was examined then might yield something entirely different to modern analysis. It might be worth looking again. I want to say something directly now, to anyone watching this who works on this case, who has ever worked on this case, who holds any fragment of Bridget's story in their hands. Those gold teeth matter. The absence of footprints matters. The 2 tubes of cream, one Norwegian, one English, matter. The brooches matter. Every single detail of this woman's life matters, because she mattered. And if anything in this episode makes you think differently about something you thought was already settled, please, look again. She has waited long enough. And to the databases holding the DNA of millions of people who bought a heritage kit to trace where they came from, to find their people, to understand their story. Keep looking, because somewhere in those millions of results is a thread that leads back to a woman on a Norwegian mountainside who deserves to finally come home. I want to end by talking to her directly, to Bridget. We called you that because you deserved a name, because you were somebody's baby once. Someone counted your fingers and toes and thought you were the most perfect thing they had ever seen. And somewhere between that moment and a cold mountainside in Norway, you lived a whole life. A complicated, dangerous, extraordinary life. You were brave in ways most of us will never have to be. You were clever and careful, and you fought right until the very end. You deserve better than that mountain. This isn't goodbye. I want you to understand that. This is just another door opening on the pathway to finding you. Another voice calling your name into the silence. Another hand reaching toward you. The scientists are getting closer. The databases are still searching. The archive still holds your jaw, your teeth, your distinctive gold crowns that carry the signature of whoever made them and wherever you came from. You are not forgotten. You were never forgotten. And one day, and I genuinely believe this day is coming, someone is going to find that thread, that dentist's record, that distant relative, that filing cabinet in a city we haven't looked in yet, and they are going to give you your name back, the one you were born with, the one someone whispered over you when you came into this world. Until that day, we see you, Bridget. We came back for you, and we are not leaving until you are found, because that is what we do here at Nemesis. We are the voice for those who cannot speak. Thank you for staying till the end with me. This one got me in the feels because the thought of a woman alone, in fear for her life with no one around to help, is terrifying. And then to have no name, as if you meant nothing, didn't even exist, is what hurts most. Please remember to like this video, as it's my second one now, and it really helps me reach more people. Please be kind enough to share it and to subscribe so you don't miss next week's one. And by hitting the bell, it lets you know when it's up. Until then, I hope you have a lovely week and keep safe.
We will meet next time. We will meet next time.